back to FANSPLAINED, a media criticism podcast with Ryan and Em. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Em.
In this episode, we're continuing our deep dive exploration series into the MCU with the Avengers. This is the finale of the MCU's Phase 1, and is the crossover culmination of the films released before it, marking it as the 6th official release of the MCU and the 10th media property in our chronological rewatch. So, this episode needs a little bit of a disclaimer, kind of like the Captain Marvel one did, because we ended up dealing with a lot of critical response in that one. We often operate with the unspoken assumption that this podcast is purely made up of our own opinions, paired with the research included on what we cover. But this episode is likely to include heavy criticism of the film, its director, and may have mentions of toxic/harassing behavior. The works of this director have a tendency to be viewed through rose-colored lenses of nostalgia, and thus if criticism of the film or the director are sensitive topics for you, as well as, the toxic behavior, we suggest that you skip through this episode, because that's going to be a bulk of the episode. We don't blame you if that's the case. Take care of yourselves. So, The Avengers was released in May of 2012, set chronologically in the same year of its release. 2012 marks the Battle of New York in MCU lore, and remains basically the anchor for the timeline for the rest of the Infinity Saga, which is everything through Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
Everything after that is kind of messy.
Iron Man 1 all the way to Endgame is
the Infinity Saga.
Yes.
Yeah. From this point, we've reached a point of no return. Just gonna say point about 15 times. Aside from the select origin films, there are very few that can stand alone from here forward. Some of the origins can, because they're origin movies, but even then, they start to reference stuff a lot heavier than films to this point have.
They tend to be very interconnected with other previous films, and then try to introduce films that are to come after it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So very few. I mean, there are a few that you could probably watch standalone and not have to go back to any of the other movies, but I can't think of many where you can just jump right in and watch on their own. Beyond
Guardians of the Galaxy, I can't really name too many that don't at least interconnect to a lot of the lore, even if it's just little bits of it here and there. Yeah. So we'll also be covering the follow-up one-shot set in the direct aftermath of the Avengers, Item 47. This marks an expansion of the scope of the one-shots project, but is also the last chronological one-shot we'll cover, as the Team Thor short films are not classified as one-shots.
Yeah.
Technically, it is not the last one made. It's just chronologically the last one we're going to touch.
Funny, but not classified as one-shots.
Yeah, exactly. So, The Avengers was produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. However, as Paramount was still originally slated to distribute as part of that initial deal with Marvel, they received their percentage of the profits or revenue as they would have had they been the ones to actually distribute it. And some releases, or at least I think early releases, we watched it on Disney Plus, so I didn't notice it, and it's probably not there on Disney Plus. But certain early releases of the film still had the Paramount logo present in it.
Yeah,
did it?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, okay.
It had the Paramount logo, and then it blended in with the Tesseract blue.
Oh, okay, good. I totally forgot about it. I was just so distracted by the Tesseract. But yeah, so they threw the Paramount logo in there, still gave them their money, but Paramount didn't actually distribute this film.
Yeah, I remember it because they had their 100 years logo on there.
Oh,
I was like,
right.
Oh, yeah, it was that.
Right. We've covered the conception of the MCU with our Captain America episode, but the MCU was built on the assumption that the films made would eventually culminate in what became the Avengers. The The film's concept began in 2003, leading to pre-production in 2005 with the partnership of Marvel and Merrill Lynch for independent studio funding and production, as we've discussed previously. The Avengers was also affected by the Writers Guild of America strike in 2007 to 2008, leading to Marvel's negotiations with the Writers Guild to get the writing process moving. I think we covered a little bit of that in Captain America as well. But
we covered quite a bit of all of this stuff in the previous ones.
There was only a little bit that comes up there, though, because the WGA strike had happened years prior to Captain America, but it's a lot of the reason why they had, like, these dates set and then ended up having to delay a lot of stuff afterward.
No, I think it worked better in their favor that it was delayed, actually.
Because the initial release date was slated for July 2011. However, we already know that this was obviously delayed as Thor and Captain America both take summer release dates for that year. Captain America was the one that was actually released in that July 2011 spot, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the exact same date, but it was their July 2011 release. Whatever. Item 47, a Marvel one-shot, was released with the Avengers home release on Blu-ray. The 12-minute one-shot, which is 3 times longer than the 2 made preceding it, was produced by Marvel and Walt Disney Studios Home Media, with returning talent to work on the bones of the project. It's the 3rd one-shot release in the series and fits into the direct aftermath, and it was filmed over a total of 4 days. I mean, it's only 12 minutes long, so it's not super surprising.
But it definitely came out looking way more cinematic than a lot of the other ones.
I mean, to be fair, again, it's 3 times longer. And they gave it a budget.
Yeah, it had a much bigger budget.
So, this is where a lot of our disclaimer is going to come in. Ditch now, or forever hold your peace, or argue with us in the comments, I guess.
Yeah, give us the engagement.
Do whatever you want. The Avengers was directed by Joss Whedon, who also has a screenwriting credit and shares a story credit with the Incredible Hulk writer Zach Penn. Penn was tapped in 2006 and hired in 2007 to write the treatment for the film. However, he was overridden when Whedon was hired to direct in 2010. According to multiple sources, including IndieWire and Vanity Fair in 2012 and 2014, respectively, Whedon was outspokenly displeased with Penn's script and told Marvel a multitude of, I see them noted on the internet as, quote, truth drops, but they just sound like really shady comments made on someone else, to me personally. So there's one quote where he says, "There was a script. There just wasn't a script I was going to film a word of."
Yeah, see, honestly, a lot of these quotes that, you found, they basically...
They aged poorly.
They not only aged poorly, they make him sound like such a douchebag in retrospect.
They make him sound like quite the diva. Which is funny, because he used to complain about that all the time, other people being divas. Okay, yeah, but your ego is...
Yeah, already his ego seems very...
Allegedly. Everything is alleged. But, yeah, his ego is up here. It's sky high. I can't see it anymore.
Like, he really thinks his writing is, God from God's mouth.
Well, here. And the second quote is even worse, where he said, "I don't think you have anything," as he's talking to Marvel executives. "Pretend this draft never happened."
Jesus Christ.
Because he wanted to control everything.
Yikes.
And so Whedon considers himself the only writer of the film, and was also openly displeased when it was ultimately deemed that he'd share a story credit with Zach Penn for the latter's work on the story's concept.
It makes that whole line about Tony calling Loki a full tilt diva have quite a bit of irony to it.
It's one of those where Tony definitely comes off as the Whedon character who's most like himself, which tends to be a thing in a lot of Joss Whedon productions.
Mm-hmm.
And, one, I think that's part of why Tony's writing actually sounds the most organic out of any character in the film.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a thing he has a tendency to do across a lot of his properties, is he usually has the one dude in there who's basically, he sees that person as himself in the story. We see this with Xander Harris. We see it with multiple dudes in Angel. Everything else he's ever done. Mal's kind of himself in Firefly.
Yeah, it's basically kind of the character he soul bonds with.
Yes, it's the character he's basically XPing himself through. And I feel like a lot of that is Tony, because Tony is very much the quick witticism, iconic line dropping guy. But so yeah, Whedon's pretty irritated that he doesn't get the sole writing credit for the movie. And he says what drew him to the project in an interview at SDCC 2010, before like the movie came out, or maybe it was 2011 before the movie came out. It was an SDCC, one of those 2 years. I don't remember which one it was. Involved the deliberate dysfunction of the team, and he said, these people shouldn't even be in the same room, let alone on the same team, and that is the definition of family.
No.
And I argue with this, one, because I feel like you're not really understanding how the Avengers works, next to the X-Men, which he also helped with the script on, quote, unquote.
The same
He's responsible for the, what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning line. That is Joss.
Yeah,
Joss did that.
Yeah, he's also responsible for, the script of Alien Resurrection.
Ugh.
So he has done this before.
Yes.
But also, no, the Avengers, I would argue, are at best friends in the comics. They're very close friends, co-workers, etc.
They're very much co-workers. The X-Men are family.
Yeah, the X-Men are an actual family.
But whether he achieves this chemistry and character cohesion in spite of this dysfunction is up for debate. We generally land on, well, a lot of it really doesn't land. There are some character moments that really work, and then there are some that absolutely don't.
Yeah, and we took great umbrage with a lot of those moments and had to keep pausing the movie to bitch about it. Because they were just so
the sheer
weird.
The sheer toxicity of the way Natasha is written around Bruce is stunning to me, and it's even more stunning to me knowing what we know about Age of Ultron and how they get paired together, and that just makes it 20 times worse than it already was.
It just feels incredibly forced. I mean, we've talked before about how there are a lot of MCU ships that feel forced, and this one this one in particular, yeah, knowing what I know now and then going back and watching, you know, the origin of it. I'm someone that loves Beauty and the Beast. I've watched several adaptations of it. I love reading different adaptations of it. Like, I've seen many, animated, live action, what have you, and it's like, I love that story.
I know you do.
And I love, you know, watching different iterations of it. I've also I get into some weird stuff into anime too, actually.
I mean, yes, it's a tried and true trope.
Mm-hmm. But that being said, I'm saying this to basically come around to how Natasha and Bruce do not fit this mold in any way, shape, or form where it makes me want to watch it. It feels deeply uncomfortable.
I even remarked when we were watching it that it felt like on the verge of abusive, and they're not even in any kind of relationship at all, but it's deeply threatening.
Yeah.
It's not even, you have like this difference in characters and size and whatever.
I even said
that. It's deeply threatening, although especially the way that Ruffalo plays Bruce in this movie, which, to be fair, and we'll get to this later, I'm sure, but, like, I appreciate Ruffalo's Bruce here because I feel like there's an actual character there.
Yeah, he does so much more with this character than Norton did in his iteration of it.
Yes, but the darkness inherent in that is really kind of glossed over when it comes to, like, relationship stuff.
But that's the thing, is, like, his interactions with all the other characters is fine. Like, the sheer chemistry he has with Tony is, like, off the charts. But every time it's between him and Nat, and I said this when we were watching, there's just something really weirdly threatening about it.
Mm-hmm.
This tension is not like good sexual tension or chemistry.
No,
it's
just
threatening.
there. Yeah, it's there just to... And I get, again, we talked about this when we were watching it as well. Like, we get that there's a desire to show that there is something that Natasha is afraid of here. But it feels like they verge almost into damseling territory with how just scary they make Bruce to her specifically.
Yeah, to her specifically. Like, even... Oh my god. Like, I didn't even notice this the other times I watched it, but after he transforms into the Hulk and, you know, they have that chase scene, he knocks her, you know, into something or whatever... Hulk literally is, like, right in front of her and raising his hand like he's about to backhand her, like you've seen in a lot of abusive scenes.
And we don't see him do that with other characters. No. Yeah, we see him beat the shit out of them. Fine. Yeah. How far are we into this? How far did I get? We got 15 minutes before we swore.
Oh, well, we were swearing anyway.
It's fine. Like... He punches Thor all the time. Yeah. He, like, flings Loki into the ground several times. Whatever. We see him beat the crap out of people all the time, but with that one is just specifically coded as abusive.
It comes off very disturbing, like
I
said.
It's not cute.
There's nothing about this that makes me feel like, oh, I'm interested in this. No, it felt very uncomfortable watching their scenes.
Yeah, and this isn't even getting into, like, the sheer reception of Whedon's handling of Bruce and Natasha specifically in Age of Ultron, which we'll get into when we get into Age of Ultron, because that's a whole nother mess by itself.
It's a whole other kettle of
But,
fish.
like, that was the first time that people really started to notice Whedon's sexism. But I would argue that it's been kind of inherent in a lot of things, especially when it comes to women and their sexuality. Yeah. We see this in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where Buffy's somehow at fault for sleeping with her boyfriend and kicking his curse back up so that he becomes the asshole vampire again or whatever. And this is specifically because if he enjoys a moment of true happiness, he loses his soul. And this somehow becomes her fault because she had sex with him and gave him her virginity.
Such a weird thing to have there.
I mean, and I used to think that we'd moved up from the Buffy movies' spider sense of PMS.
Yeah, I mean, it made sense with vampires, to be honest.
Yeah, but you see this in Buffy. You see this in Angel a lot with his treatment of basically every female character in the damn show, including Cordelia / his real-life treatment of Charisma Carpenter, which is just reprehensible.
Yes.
You see this again with his treatment of Inara in Firefly, and I know that Firefly is like sacrosanct for a lot of people, because it's always the one that everybody wants to renew it, and it's always the one that has the biggest nostalgia goggles on it.
Yeah.
Thus, my disclaimer, because I know that a lot of pro-Firefly people really, really hate it when you drag Firefly, but his treatment of Inara is fucking disgusting.
Yeah. I mean,
constant slut-shaming.
Like, I get that's part of her character and everything, but
okay, but he's the one that concepted the companion thing in the first place, and if you're gonna go on about how, well, but they're not just whores, they're companions, and it's all about education and philosophy and whatever, like courtesans, right? Basically.
Or basically geishas.
Yeah, like that, like not the Italian movie, but the movie about the Italian courtesans we watched.
Dangerous Beauty.
Yeah. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay, but like when his XP character is the one like literally constantly slut-shaming her, and then we're supposed to buy this as the one true pairing of the series?
Yikes.
I'm sorry, but it's really gross. His constant just slut-shaming of Inara's awful, because he'll juxtapose Inara next to, I think her name was Kaylee, the mechanic who had a sex drive but didn't really get to use it that often, and she's kind of seen as like this twee perfect nice girl. And then you have Zoe, who was like the right hand of the XB character, and she's generally seen as fine because she's married in a relationship with someone else, so she's not threatening to the main character. And then you have River, who's just like a child.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that gets into Whedon's obsessive love with torturing women in ways that really fuck with them mentally and physically. Kind of getting off on it a little bit, I'd argue, because it comes up in literally everything he does.
Which I regret to say that as much as I love the concept of Dollhouse, as much as I enjoyed some of the execution of that show, I will say that, yeah, there's a lot of that goes into that, too.
It's all over Buffy. It's all over... It's all over Firefly. It's the one reason I didn't want him to handle Natasha's backstory, which unfortunately we get in Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
His Wanda is basically nothing but just River all over again. Again, I'm getting into Age of Ultron territory and not this movie, but they share so many similarities, and the signs were there from this movie onward, but a lot of us didn't see it at the time because Joss Whedon was still revered in 2012.
And I think because of how much... I think a big part of this movie's success was the fact that a lot of people did not know how an Avengers movie would be successful. And so when this movie came out, and it just, it seemed to flow good, everything seemed to work, it was really fun to watch, it was exciting.
Yeah, it's an event.
Yeah.
It's an event.
And it, it blew people out of the water when it happened, much like Iron Man 1. It was a huge success. I remember when it came out, it was all anyone could talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I loved it at the time too, but it just does not hold up on multiple rewatches, and a decade later, like,
there are parts of it that fall very flat now.
Yes.
And I think that's also part of why people revered him all the way, to Age of Ultron, because we, loved the Avengers. So we were like, yeah, sure, let's do another Joss Whedon Avengers movie. Why not?
This is why I deeply wish we'd gotten the Jon Favreau Avengers.
I know. Now, ever since you mentioned that, I'm just, like, constantly bummed out that we did not get that, because I'm just, man, it probably would have been so
much better. So much better. So, sure, okay, so he doesn't really meet the mark on a lot of character cohesion. There's also, the Steve and Tony not having any kind of chemistry at all, despite the fact that their relationship and friendship is supposed to sell a hell of a lot of the series.
Yeah.
But even from the get-go, Tony is just antagonistic for no reason, really.
No reason. He's just a straight-up dick, right to Steve's face. Steve didn't do anything.
Steve's writing in general is so absolutely painful.
He comes off like an uptight...
conservative Christian.
Yeah, it's really weird.
An uptight, conservative, 80-year-old Christian. Because we're taking that, he's 90, ha, extremely literally.
And then you have Nat drinking the Kool-Aid of S.H.I.E.L.D. a bit too
much. You have... just the disjointed dialogue all over the place, where you have these really iconic lines mixed in with just 15 minutes of nonsense.
You had Joss acting like he can try to replicate the Shakespearean quality of Thor and failing.
You have him also trying to, like, be, Aaron Sorkin. He
is the wannabe Aaron Sorkin.
That's what I'm saying. He was trying to be Aaron Sorkin.
It was like a few months ago that I realized this, and ever since I'm like, no, he's the guy who wants to be Aaron Sorkin so bad.
Sorry, my Prada's at the cleaners!
Along with my fuck you flip-flops.
Better lawyer up, asshole!
Like, Joss Whedon wishes he could have written that script.
like, that's how dialogue should flow. I even noticed this when we were watching it last night, where even if you have, like, these one-liners that are really good, and every once in a while you'll get that, like, perfect one-liner like that, an ant has no quarrel with a boot. Perfect. Perfect. The rest of the dialogue makes no sense. And then you'll have the equally super sexist moment of using an antiquated whining cunt insult at the single female character.
Yeah. It's
I'm sorry, but since when would Loki ever use that? Insulting her is not the problem. He's doing it to needle a reaction. I fully understand what he's doing.
And I feel like
But it would have made more sense to drag the Red Room into it or needle at her personal bullshit a hell of a lot more than just calling her a, quote, mewling quim. And the thing is that many people didn't even realize what that meant. Nope. And it went all over fan merchandise for years. And I'm like, you realize what you're calling yourselves, right?
Nope.
No, a lot of people did not. But, girls, maybe don't do that anymore.
Well, I mean, for a while, you know, the biggest fans of Benedict Cumberbatch called themselves the Cumber Bitches, so...
Okay, but if they're calling themselves that, that's one thing.
I feel like it's a fandom thing that they end up trying to, like, I guess, reclaim it.
Oh,
but
I hate it.
Really
I hate it so much, and I've hated it since 2012.
It just really feels like he's always kind of been this wannabe Aaron Sorkin writer, where, sure, he has good ideas here and there, he can land some really good one-liners, but he is not, you know, the awesome writer that he thinks he is.
No, God, no.
Because when it comes down to it, he needs to do better with his dialogue. He needs to do better with his structure.
When the dialogue is the thing that he is constantly praised for.
I know, that's the thing that gets me.
But the only reason it tends to work in things like Buffy is because everyone is throwing those constant one-liners at each other. Yeah. It's not one-liner and then people responding to it for 2 minutes and then another one-liner that may or may not fall flat.
Yeah,
and then people responding to that for 2 minutes.
Basically,
like, it's just exhausting in this movie.
In the Avengers, he was given characters that were dynamic because of their differences, and I feel like he genuinely struggled in trying to juggle all these
characters. Yeah. Yeah, he couldn't write a lot of them. He can't write the Asgardians. I can't stand, we've already gone over, I can't stand the Loki insult there, and I sincerely cannot, and I have never, ever liked he's adopted. I'm sorry, but that breaks Thor's entire motivation that you just spent 15 minutes establishing.
Yeah.
And then you turn around and go, oh, but he's adopted. I'm sorry, but you brought Thor all the way out here for his brother, and then you're just going to be immediately dismissive of him? That's fucked up.
I know it pissed off a lot of adoption advocates, because it's like, are you trying to basically say that only adopted, you know, children or siblings can have, like, violent tendencies or any of this shit? Like,
or that they're not going to get along. Yeah, the implication
of it were really shitty.
The implication is about as bad as J.K. Rowling's handling of Harry Potter versus Tom Riddle, and how their parents' sins basically account for how they act by themselves. Because Tom's mother seduced a dude with duplicitous means, versus Harry's parents were just so in love, so he's fine and he's perfect. These things are kind of fucked up.
It's always disheartening and just shitty when writers will sacrifice genuine character development and character moments for, like, a one-liner, or to, you know, make, oh, well, you know, they're bad and they're good, you know, like...
Yeah, and I feel like this movie does that.
Like, taking out all the complexity that, you know, Slytherin House can have versus Gryffindor.
Right.
Like, that's a whole nother thing, but that's just an example, you know, it's disappointing when writers do that, and it feels like...
He's insulting the main female character because he's a bad guy.
And
so we're just gonna throw the sexism out here, even though, like, Loki would be more creative than this.
Yes, and also, again, it just further points to how he struggles really hard with these different character types.
Mm-hmm.
They all speak differently. They have their own ways of speaking. They have their own ways of showing emotion, of being active or passive. And it's like, if you don't, I've always said this when it comes to writing, if you do not understand the character's personality and you don't understand how they speak, it doesn't matter what else you get right, because the character's never going to sound right. They're never going to, seem like themselves. Now, you could argue the quality of some of the movies that came before this one. Sure, we have. But the thing is, a lot of these origin movies were pretty solid because it felt like the writers understood who the characters were.
Unless you're Edward Norton. But, so at least, even if he doesn't achieve all of the character marks, he did achieve studio demands, which were basically the 3-act structure, a fight against Loki at some point, and a final battle in Manhattan. Yeah. And that's all he had to do with this one. Age of Ultron had a lot more mandates, and he definitely struggled with that and tried to blame that for all the other problems with it. Again, we'll get to that when we actually do Age of Ultron.
This should probably be our longest episode by far.
Oh, but the story also took very different turns and saw different iterations. So, for instance, ScarJo's return was not always a foregone conclusion. So, early treatments of Whedon's draft had Wasp present in Natasha's place, and Whedon wanted Zooey Deschanel for that.
Ew.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we are not happy with Evangeline Lilly right now, and Zoe, learn what a vaccine is. Thank you very much.
And Zooey Deschanel, that's not on her behalf. She's a very good actress.
It's just an odd choice.
She's a very good singer, but no, she is not a choice for either of those.
It's just a very, very odd choice.
Yeah. Also, you want the Wasp there, but not Natasha? Both of them are pretty intrinsic.
Yeah, both of them are founding members.
Yeah. Why pick one over the other?
Because you can only have one girl per movie, obviously.
Well, then I'll pick the one that was already in, like, a movie prior.
I mean, obviously, this changed once they landed ScarJo, so whatever. Another had Whedon downplaying Loki's presence in the film, replacing him with Ezekiel Stain, who's Obadiah's son, as a villain. According to Thrillist, Whedon said, I also worried that one British character actor was not enough to take on Earth's mightiest heroes, and that we'd feel like we were rooting for the overdog. So I wrote a huge draft with Ezekiel Stain, Obadiah Stain's son. Oh my god, wow, I fucked that one up. In it. But okay, sir, Tom Hiddleston is not a, quote, character actor. I will come for you.
Also,
in the game of Minecraft, I will come for you.
Excuse you, Loki has already been pre-established in the MCU. Ezekiel Stain has not. What the fuck was that choice even? Excuse you?
But also, I'm sorry, Hiddleston is a Shakespearean actor. He is not a character actor. These are not the same thing. I would argue that Harry Dean Stanton is a character actor.
Yes, he is.
Tom Hiddleston is not. Just because you couldn't be and didn't want to be Kenneth Branagh here, Joss, does not make Tom Hiddleston a character actor. And I find this especially funny considering that you made a questionable adaptation of Much Ado.
Yeah, that's the true irony there, is that he made a black and white adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing that he also tried to modernize while also using a lot of the same dialogue from the play.
But not always. But also, this, like, half of Thor's writing is ragging on Branagh for making it Shakespearean.
Mm-hmm.
When that worked for all the actors, it worked for the tone of the film,
and
it clearly fails in this one because he is not up to it.
Yeah, he clearly doesn't know what he's doing.
And, like, that line about, does mother know you weareth her drapes, just sounds, it's such a smack in the face.
To what Branagh managed to accomplish. Also, excuse you, sir. Again, Kenneth Branagh has a far more expansive and more impressive filmography than you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So take a seat there, Joss, and
but also
learn
I'm going to argue with you forever about calling Tom Hiddleston a character actor.
Yeah, especially
sir.
now of all. Well, I mean, back then, I guess you could understand why, but at the same time, I don't know, do your research, number one, and number two, that came back to blow a raspberry in your face, didn't it?
His xenophobia really shows, and it's been showing for a long time.
Yeah.
Because even in this film, we remarked on this, his understanding of, like, international / quote, foreign characters is really questionable. The film was criticized for its depiction of India, first off.
Yeah.
His understanding of Russia is one of those, in Soviet Russia, memes. That's basically his whole understanding of Russia. And what was the other one that was in there that was really cringy? I know that there was another nationality that we were just like, really, dude? I don't remember. Anyway, this is a thing that's very common, and we see this even in his treatment of Gal Gadot on the Justice League, because she called him out recently, and he tried to claim that because English was her second language, she misunderstood him.
Wow.
She clapped back at him, telling her no, she understood him perfectly well, because he threatened to tank her career unless she read her lines verbatim, and they ruined her character, and he was deliberately trying, allegedly, was deliberately trying to make her character look fucking dumb.
I mean, it definitely sounded dumb in the scenes I've seen of it, when she's like, cow! Like, what the hell was that? I
remember watching Justice League. I have not watched the Snyder one yet. I'm sure that it's at least better.
I'm sure
than the Whedon version, but
I haven't even watched.
His treatment of Diana is about as bad as his treatment of Nat. And knowing that he's xenophobic on top of this, especially in his response to Gadot, is wildly fucked up. But you even see it in his, like, weird understandings of characters from other nationalities, right? Like, you see it in his Russians, they're just a big meme. You see it in his Brits, they all drink tea and are stuffy, and haha, isn't it funny? Like, that's the whole joke about Brits. They drink tea, and they talk funny.
They sound like they all sound like they're trying to perform Shakespeare in the park.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally how Buffy treats all of the British characters. They drink tea, and they're stuffy.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, like, you know, like, his understanding of the Mediterranean is they make shawarma.
Yeah.
I guess.
I think that was the other one you were talking about.
Even though, like, I like shawarma. But no, it was because of Tony's understanding of this, and it's like, dude, you live in New York.
You live in New York, and
you know what shawarma was.
And Howard, from Agent Carter,
is deeply coded as being Mediterranean, at least, or like mixed race.
Yeah, or at least like Italian or something. Like,
yeah.
Because of where he came from. Like, he didn't come from money. He wasn't rich.
No.
He literally he said he lived on the rougher side of...
Yeah, and he's, like, best friends with, like, the Italian mobster in season 2. So, like, they definitely code Howard as not white. And then we get to, I mean, to be fair, Agent Carter was made after the Avengers was. To be fair. But at the same time, I feel like if you're from a place that has all of this international cuisine and all of this melting pot of cultures present in the city, you're going to be probably a little more familiar with it than you have been. More. Also, you were in the Middle East for ages. Is this literally just the nod at, haha, Tony was in the Middle East and now he cares what shawarma is? Even though that's more of a Mediterranean thing, it's not exclusively Middle Eastern.
I hate that.
Whatever. It's not great. His understandings of things are stereotypical at best. And I feel like that's really what his feminism has always been. It's been very this one type that never really grew up, and his understandings of different cultures have always been this one stereotype that never really grew up. And it didn't age well in this one for me at all either.
Looking at a lot of his feminism, it's like, yeah, sure, he has women beating up dudes, and he, tries to do different things with those characters. But if you write your characters a certain way and you put them through certain things, it does have really weird and even insulting implications when you want to sit there and call yourself a feminist, and then you keep characterizing all of your women a certain way
and demonizing them for the sex they're having, or consistently framing the camera on their ass, or for some reason leaving Natasha's cleavage unzipped the entire movie, even though like she'd literally zip up that catsuit because she's smart and utilitarian about it. Why would she be leaving her cleavage open to get debris and dirt and blood and whatever else in it?
As much as I love, butt shots and everything.
I know you do.
As much as I appreciate them, she should have at least zipped up her damn catsuit during the fight so nothing gets down in there. Come on! Again,
and I get that there is an aspect of Natasha that uses her sexuality.
Yeah.
To screw with other people. Sure. I get this, but at the same time, the way that it's filmed and framed specifically makes a big difference in how that comes off, and the way that Whedon does it tends to be extremely male-gazy, no matter how quote-unquote strong the woman is.
You're just gonna tell me she just casually has her suit zipped down
all the way down to her bra line?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, sure.
That makes sense. It's not like she wouldn't whip that out, during specific scenarios. Sure, I can understand that.
Oh yeah,
then.
yeah, 100%.
But she just constantly walks around like that.
Press X to doubt. X. This isn't Showgirls, my dude. I'm just gonna keep bringing it up. Whedon also claims credit for the concept and addition of Thanos, and in an interview with Slash Film, he said, he, meaning Thanos, for me, is the most powerful and fascinating Marvel villain. He's the great granddaddy of the badasses, and he's in love with death, and I just think that's so cute.
Ugh.
This honestly just characterizes how I feel about how he characterizes these relationships.
This is so weird to say. Why would you say that?
And then he goes on to wax poetic on issue numbers and stuff to prove his geek cred or whatever. And I checked out at that point.
Whatever.
That was really the crux of that quote. That was the important part.
Yeah, it was. And it was really fucking weird. Ugh.
Yeah, but I think...
still not over it.
No, it's very weird. And then, thankfully, Marvel didn't quite go there.
Ugh.
Didn't quite, because they could have, but they didn't quite go there in the way that it kind of panned out.
Instead, they made Thanos, without his helmet, look like Joss Whedon.
Oh my god, they did!
Instead, they did that.
I'm dead. I think we've covered what we can on the directing all by itself. So Whedon aside, item 47 brings us the return of Louis D'Esposito as director, who we saw previously on the Agent Carter one-shot, even though this one-shot was filmed before Agent Carter. And Eric Pearson is the writer for S.H.I.E.L.D. He's the guy who's been doing all the one-shots and all the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff throughout. Yeah. So, again, why this feels consistent? Because it's the same guy. An early idea for the one-shot actually involved the funeral for Agent Coulson. Spoilers, I guess. It's a 10-year-old movie. As a follow-up to his demise in the Avengers, but this was eventually scrapped, and it was decided to draw focus away from Coulson for this in the final one-shot production to follow, since the first two had focused directly on him. Additionally, upon seeing item 47, Disney CEO Bob Iger greenlit a TV series based on S.H.I.E.L.D., which would eventually become 2013's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
That's unfortunate.
So, now that we're 45 minutes into this, the summary of the film.
The summary
of the film. The Avengers is the culmination of the origin stories of Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and Captain America, rounded out with the inclusion of Black Widow and Hawkeye from prior films. Loki, having plans to destroy the whole of Jotunheim foiled, fell into open space after Thor wrecked the Bifrost Bridge to stop him, aka the end of Thor. Discovered by a then mysterious force with an army in waiting, Loki is given the power of a glowing scepter and uses the power of the Tesseract being experimented on by S.H.I.E.L.D. to come to Earth with aspirations of subjugating humanity. The scepter allows him to possess people's hearts, I guess, because he touches hearts rather than their brains, but we know it's the Mind Stone from later. Yeah. So he's possessing people. Whatever. So he
goes in through the heart.
He goes in through the heart, but it possesses their brain. And he possesses researcher Eric Selvig, returning from Thor, and S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Hawkeye / Clint Barton, who both help him steal the Tesseract and escape the S.H.I.E.L.D. facility before it collapses. In the wake of Loki's theft, Nick Fury officially begins to recruit for the Avengers Initiative, bringing together Natasha Romanoff from an interrogation job, Bruce Banner from hiding in India, Steve Rogers from his recent thawing, and Tony Stark from building his tower / all his energy work in New York. The team is then met by Thor, who desperate to get back to Earth to take Loki back home. Loki ends up captured on the Avengers helicarrier and uses the power of the scepter to tap into the team's collective aggression in an effort to unleash the Hulk from within Banner's thin control. As the Hulk emerges, Loki escapes, and then the final effort to stop the invasion Loki draws into New York begins. In turn, Item 47 follows the wake of this battle in New York, introducing us to aspiring thieves Claire and Benny, who are kind of like Bonnie and Clyde, who begin to rob banks using discarded alien weapons left behind in the wake of the battle. Eventually, the lovers are caught by S.H.I.E.L.D. and then are recruited as new agents. And that's the one shot.
Yeah. It's pretty cute.
It's very cute. I want my pink mask back.
No.
I want my pink mask back.
No.
The Avengers stars a whole swath of actors we've addressed before, bringing us the return of Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, and Samuel L. Jackson. New to the starring cast is Mark Ruffalo, the replacement for Edward Norton's previous place as Bruce Banner. We also see the return and introduction of several secondary several secondary actors, I should say.
They're supporting characters.
Playing supporting characters.
Yeah.
Including Clark Gregg, Gwyneth Paltrow, Stellan Skarsgård, Paul Bettany, and Max Milano Hernandez, as well as Cobie Smulders as Agent Maria Hill, Jenny Agutter, I hope that is how you say that, as Councilwoman Hawley, and Powers Booth as Gideon Malik, another member of the World Security Council. He's only important because he comes back later in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
We also see a number of cameos, including Stan Lee as an old man playing chess in Central Park, Whedon alumni Alexis Denisoff as the Other, who's basically the right hand of Thanos. He's not named in the movie, and neither is Thanos.
He's the guy with 2 thumbs.
Yeah, he's the dude that's constantly screaming at Loki. Mm-hmm. Damon Poitier as the model for Thanos, so this was before they cast Josh Brolin as anything. Enver Yokai. Yay! Enver! We got real excited when we saw him.
Yeah, we literally were like, hey,
Enver!
Souza!
Hey, Souza!
Hey, Souza!
Hey, Souza! As an NYC officer before his casting as Souza and Agent Carter. Harry Dean Stanton as a security guard. He's the one that finds Bruce naked.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of other movies.
Mm-hmm. Warren Cole as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, but we just collectively dub him Galaga Guy.
Yeah.
And Polish director Jerzy Skolimowski, I think that's probably how you say that, hopefully, who did Moonlighting, as Natasha's interrogation victim, so he's that, like, big Russian guy.
That gets his ass beat?
Yeah. Yeah, so he's just a random other director that they got for that part, I guess.
Good.
So there are other acting notes here. So Gwyneth Paltrow was hired on Robert Downey Jr.'s insistence because Joss didn't originally want to involve any of the supporting characters from the individual films, even though Selvig's there.
Right. Because
he wanted to destroy everybody's support systems. And that's the only way that they could come together and rely on each other or something, I guess.
That's very lazy writing.
Yeah, but that was his concept.
It is. It's very lazy. If you cannot find a way to get them to, connect or, work together, then
I guess we should just be thankful that they didn't fridge a woman in place of Coulson. Because I feel like that would be the common choice there. Would have been to kill, say, Maria.
Even though no one knew her.
Even though no one knew her. Then you also have the note, and I remembered that Robert Downey Jr. made more money than everyone else, but I didn't really realize how much more money he made than everyone else until I was looking it up, and everyone starring in the movies, so everyone with, the big names, starring roles, they were making maybe $2 to $6 million, depending on who they were. So, Sam Jackson and ScarJo would be in the higher level there. Hemsworth and Evans would be kind of on the lower end of that because they weren't, huge actors at the time. Robert Downey Jr. made $50 million for this movie. He made, 10 times the amount anybody else made for this movie.
Yeah, it's because he was the favorite.
And I get this, and I know that that's why they had to do all those salary negotiations for Age of Ultron.
Yeah, which Robert Downey Jr. did.
Good for him.
He helped, he gunned for all of his co-stars to get more pay. And what I mean by he's the favorite is that he's the one who started the whole MCU, pretty much. He's the one who got the most popular, and he was the most well-known character. So yeah, he was getting the most pay, but then he turned around and was like, no, my co-stars should be getting more pay.
Yeah, but I didn't realize how big the discrepancy actually was. And I was like, holy shit. Robert Downey Jr. also suggested to Whedon that they try and make Tony the main character of the Avengers, and they actually tried a script where, the movie opened on Tony, and it just did not work. Obviously, it did not work, because this is supposed to be an ensemble, not
this is
the Tony Stark show. And by virtue of Whedon being able to write Tony Stark better, it still kind of becomes the Tony Stark show, unfortunately, but that's not necessarily the actual intent like that other script would have been.
Yes.
So then you also have the introduction of Cobie Smulders, who was actually on, the short list for Whedon's unmade, terrible, sexist, awful Wonder Woman movie. Thank God we never got it. He wanted Cobie in that movie. That movie did not happen, and so she ended up on a short list for this movie for Maria, alongside Marina Baccarin, who was in Firefly as Inara. Who got also treated like shit on Firefly, but whatever. So we ended up with Cobie. And she had to hire her own, Black Ops training because she didn't, quote, do enough fighting in the movie for them to give her an actual trainer. Even though, her stuff would have looked terrible had she not had any of that. And I still, to this day, noticed it more in this rewatch than the others, but to this day, I still feel like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should have centered on Maria Hill, not focused on bringing Phil Coulson back from the dead.
Yeah.
It would have made more sense if you'd used those deleted scenes with the World Security Council from Avengers,
put that
the alternate ending or whatever, and use them as, the opening to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
Would have, made S.H.I.E.L.D. make a lot more sense.
And also would have made more sense to... Well, for one thing, it would have made Coulson's death actually more impactful.
Which it isn't when he's not dead.
Yeah, if he had stayed dead. And then it makes more sense to go through Maria, because she's Nick Fury's right hand, and she's very, at the top of the chain, kind of, in S.H.I.E.L.D., and it would make sense to see it through her eyes and be introduced to all these other levels of S.H.I.E.L.D. and to all these other characters in S.H.I.E.L.D. through her, and get to develop more of her character. It would have been better.
And I get why she couldn't. I think that they were still making How I Met Your Mother by this point. Were they?
Which was a massive disservice to her there, too, from what I understand.
Yeah, but I think they were still making that, so there would have been, schedule conflicts all over the place. So I get why it couldn't necessarily happen either. But I feel like from a story perspective, if you'd really wanted early Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to actually land.
Yeah.
It would have made a lot more sense to use the material you already had there as an opening rather than using Cobie as, like, a, occasional cameo person.
You also could have had a primarily,
female team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I necessarily trust Joss Whedon with that either, but he was really only the idea guy on this, and that's why you see a lot of his obsession with secret government agency stuff.
I think it was
all over this.
I mean, considering a lot of S.H.I.E.L.D. is dudes in the movies, I think it would have been really cool to have a primarily female-led team in the show.
Yeah, because the way that Coulson comes off in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and you'll get to see this when we start watching it in about a month or so.
Ugh.
He starts coming off as the XB character.
No. Oh.
Yeah, unfortunately. There's also, Ruffalo replaces Norton, obviously, when negotiations with Norton just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
So what they did, and I could probably get into this in special effects, which is up next, but I'll do it here. So what they did, basically, is they, like, body modeled the Hulk and, like, actually face modeled the Hulk, so he looked more like Mark Ruffalo rather than whatever the Hulk looked like in The Incredible Hulk, which was rough.
I think they were trying... Honestly, he looks closer to what Ang Lee's version of the Hulk looked like.
Yeah, but so they melded Ruffalo's voice with Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah.
So that you kind of got both of them for a little bit, except Puny God, that was purely Ruffalo.
Puny God.
And then they used a bodybuilder named Steve Rom as the body model, but he's also a male stripper. You're welcome. You're welcome for this information.
And finally, Bruce was naked, too, at one point. And I was like, finally!
The physics make sense, sort of.
Finally!
Like, one of the acting highlights for me, 100%, is actually Ruffalo. And it's the one thing I will give this film props on, is it finally made the Hulk engaging.
Yeah. Like, I was excited to see the Hulk smash.
Yeah, he works in small doses.
Running around, busted through shit like the Kool-Aid Man over here.
Oh, yeah! Oh, smash!
Yes.
Yes. Oh, smash!
And also just the chemistry between him and Tony was just off the charts. Like, that was the real romance in that movie.
Yes.
That was the true romance, was between Bruce and Tony. They were constantly eye-fucking each other. And I was just like, why can't I have this?
Because
Marvel?
It's gay and they won't give it to us. Because it's gay.
But I swear to God,
they were so cute.
Ooh, they were so cute. And I felt nothing between Tony and Pepper. And then you get Bruce and Tony in that room together. And it's like...
and then you have... the way that this movie frames Pepper, where she's the girlfriend now, so she's so casual and hip and barely wearing clothes and never wearing shoes in any scene, including when they're remodeling the building after it's been all fucked up, and why the hell are you not wearing shoes?
Yeah, she's getting laid now, so she's totally more relaxed. See?
Yeah, she looks like Mary Jane more than she looks like Pepper.
Yeah, she looks like she's trying to be fucking Mary Jane in her booty shorts over there.
Oh, it was awful. And, like, the whole, like... I did not actually find her relationship, quote-unquote, with Coulson cute. It's really just there to kind of, like, sexualize her more and make Tony jealous. And it's just, I don't like anything about how they handled Pepper. The only time she looks like Pepper is when she's on the plane.
Yeah, for like a hot minute we see that. And
like, she doesn't always have to be in a full fucking suit, but I'm not gonna buy that she's just rolling around in booty shorts.
Looking like, the hippie that Gwyneth Paltrow tries to be.
Yeah, this is like Goop Gwyneth Paltrow. I was not seeing her play a character. I was seeing Gwyneth Paltrow. Mm-hmm. Not my favorite.
And then when they're in the tower, I noticed it. I pointed it out where it's like they're renovating. They have all this debris and all this other shit everywhere, and she's barefoot.
She's still not wearing shoes.
She's barefoot.
Why are you not wearing shoes? You are going to need a tetanus shot.
You are renovating a place. Why the hell are you walking around barefoot?
You're gonna need a tetanus shot, Gwyneth.
It made no sense.
Yeah, it was
It hashtag triggered me. Because it's like, it makes no sense!
Aside from that, though, I feel like a lot of what could be classified as, like, acting problems is way more the script than it is the actors.
Yeah.
Because I feel like everyone, with the exception of maybe Renner, because he didn't really have a character, and even by the end of the movie, he still really doesn't have much of one, unfortunately.
I mean, he was trying.
He was trying, but everyone else had, like, this opportunity to kind of discover their characters, to get comfortable with their characters, to know the ins and outs of them, and they're trying their best despite this janky script, the janky dialogue, especially Chris Evans and Hiddleston. Hiddleston is trying his damnedest to sell the shit out of that terrible screenplay.
He is.
Oh my god. He's trying so hard. He'll get, like, one good line, and then he'll still deliver the rest of that shit in the same tone,
and this
even though it's all garbage.
And this is what proves he is far more than some British character actor.
I swear to God, Joss.
No, he was one of the best actors that you will ever direct.
Yeah, right? Fuck. Item 47, on the other hand, involves a much smaller cast in comparison and only brings in Max Milano Hernandez as Agent Sitwell as our familiar character in the production. We're also introduced to Lizzie Kaplan as Claire from Mean Girls. That's what everyone knows her from. She's Janice Ian. Jesse Bradford as Benny, and we finally figured out that he was the boyfriend from Bring It On, and that's how we knew him.
That's how I recognized him. I was like, I know I've seen his face.
And Titus Welliver as Felix, who's also another senior agent at S.H.I.E.L.D., and he also comes back for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't know, I don't remember if it's in, like, a, like, constant capacity, or if it's also just cameo, I don't remember. But he does come back in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. And then you also have Hernandez as Sitwell also pops in for stuff here and there.
Yeah.
Both film and he might be on the show. I don't remember. It's been a really long time since I've watched any part of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
He's been popping up a lot,
yeah.
actually.
Early MCU, he was in it a lot for being just some random side dude
S.H.I.E.L.D.
from
agent.
S.H.I.E.L.D., yeah. The Avengers brings us the cinematography talents of Seamus McGarvey, whose previous work includes a bunch of stuff for Joe Wright, like Atonement, Anna Karenina, Cyrano, The Soloist, Pan, and an episode of Black Mirror. His other credits also include The Hours, 50 Shades of Grey, High Fidelity, and a bunch of other stuff.
Oh god, 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, he did 50 Shades of Grey. So
that's sad.
We noticed this issue with the Avengers that I'd never quite noticed on earlier rewatches because I wasn't watching it as deeply or as critically.
Yeah.
But there are issues with this film where a lot of it, and most of it, has to do with, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. scenes specifically. But a lot of it flips between being film quality and framing for television.
Like
or lighting for television.
Lighting
and everything in S.H.I.E.L.D. looks like it is already lit and filmed for a TV show.
Yeah.
It very rarely looks like a film when you're dealing with S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, it's the way it looks.
There's
visually.
no artistry in it. It's all just bright lights where you can see everything. It's like sitcom lighting. There's not really a ton of...
No, it's CW lighting.
Yeah, there's not a ton of artistry in it. It's just bright so you can see things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, there are other parts of the movie, even outside, like, the action sequences, that can look genuinely good.
Yeah, there are a lot
and I have to wonder if this is not
there are quite a few
McGarvey's
scenes.
fault over Whedon's heavy TV background.
Honestly, looking at his filmography, because I'm even going to say it from what... I have never watched 50 Shades of Grey. I've just watched a assload of reviews on it where people rip it apart.
The look of it still looks nice.
Yeah, the look of it is probably the best... the first movie is probably the best looking one out of all of them.
Yeah.
So I would venture to say it was most likely Joss's decision and his experience with television that made those scenes look the way they did, versus a dude who has managed...
fucking Atonement and Anna Karenina and got, like, award noms for that shit.
Yeah, and The Hours. And, you know, I mean, sure, he has a few meh, but the fact is that he's managed to make some beautiful looking films.
I mean, like, we're psyched for Cyrano. We haven't even seen it yet, but the trailers for that already look stunning.
They look gorgeous. Because even if I dislike the story and how it ends, I know I'm at least gonna love this. I'm gonna love how it looks.
But compare the look of that to the look of those parts of the Avengers that don't look like a movie.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking it's
rough.
I think it's more... Because that's the thing with the director and the cinematographer. It's ultimately the director's choice. The cinematographer is just in charge of the lighting, the consistency of those kinds of scenes, and how it's shot, whereas the director is the one who calls the shots on pretty much everything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, they have a hand in the editing as well. Mm-hmm. They have a hand in a lot of stuff.
So there could have been scenes and shots that didn't look like that, but Joss wanted to use the other scenes.
Yeah, I mean, that's... this was also McGarvey's first film on a digital camera. And
that
he filmed
probably makes a difference too, to be honest.
And he filmed it in a 1:85:1 ratio, which is uncommon for this kind of movie. I don't remember a whole lot about aspect ratios, I'm sorry. To accommodate basically all the differing heights of the characters, where you have like ScarJo, who's like tiny, and then you have fake Hulk, who's like 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
And then, Hemsworth, who's just a beanpole.
He's an int.
As is Hiddleston. They're both just beanpoles.
They're fucking ints over here.
They're huge. Huge. But I don't even mind that Loki looks tall because he's supposed to be a frost giant.
Yeah.
Let him be tall.
Actually, he's small for a frost giant, but it still makes sense for him to be taller than other people.
Let him be tall. The special effects were handled by upwards of 14 different companies. There were about 2,200 different special effects shots. ILM was at the forefront, because ILM is usually at the forefront, especially now that they're owned by Disney. Or, that Marvel is owned by Disney at this point. So they handled some effects for the helicarrier. There were other companies that did, like, the liftoff part of the helicarrier. As well as the New York City, like, cityscape, because a lot of this was not filmed in New York. A lot of it was filmed in, like, Chicago and Albuquerque.
Yeah, because it's cheaper to film there.
Mm-hmm. And digital body doubles, Iron Man's suit, and the Hulk mocap stuff. And so the Hulk mocap stuff was actually, like, he actually got to play the Hulk, which is new because a lot of them were just straight up CGI. Mm-hmm. And so, like, he'd wear, like, this prosthetic to give at least some kind of, like, reference for the size. And then he'd wear a mocap suit, and it would actually be there so that they could graft the Hulk onto him. And they used 4 different cameras, 2 just for, like, the body movement, like the full body stuff, and then 2 specifically for his face. And that's how they actually make the Hulk look like Ruffalo.
Yeah.
And so they also had plans, like Disney actually negotiated with Sony to get rights to show the Oscorp building in New York City, and they were going to do it, but they had so much of the cityscape stuff already done that they couldn't retroactively fit it in there, so all those negotiations were for basically jack shit. So they didn't use any of that. And the film had a bunch of, like, Oscar and BAFTA nominations for special effects, because of course it did.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that, for the most part, there are some, like, green screen parts that don't hold up, usually when it's, like, directly on the character at night, like that one scene with Steve and Iron Man in Germany. Looks ridiculous.
Yes, it does.
Did not age well. But a lot of the effects really look good for a 10-year-old movie.
Yeah, a lot of them have not aged poorly. They still look very good. Like, the reflecting tiles on the helicarrier still looks very, very nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the invisibility stuff that they should have done with the Wonder Woman plane.
And you got the portal stuff still looks good. The alien creature thing coming through it still looks very nice.
Oh,
that whole scene where the Hulk punches it, still a great scene.
Oh, yeah.
Gets you pumped
but there are
oh
also...
my God.
There are also certain parts of those action sequences that could have... That action sequence at the end 1 is like 42 minutes long. We checked.
It
is way too long.
We paused it right at the where
New York starts.
Mm-hmm. And it was 42 minutes left of the movie.
This movie is like a half hour too long. I'm gonna straight up say it because
it's over 2 hours long.
Because so much of that final battle in New York, like we'd see like these scenes that looked great, and then like they would be led into with these ones that weren't filmed as well, and it was straight up like a shot that they could have just cut out.
Yes.
And it would have looked so much better if they'd done that. So there were ones that, again, it would go back and forth between New York looking like a movie and it looking like a TV show.
Yes.
And it was just, the editing needed to be a hell of a lot tighter. But one of the editors was actually, like, used to work with Joss on a lot of stuff, too. So I have a feeling that that's where some of that also came from.
Yeah.
So, despite many of our misgivings after the fact with this film, it did set a long list of records, which establishes its place in film history, even if a lot of the aspects of it don't hold up subjectively in retrospect. It had a record opening weekend and opening week for any film at $207 million and $270 million, respectively. It had the second week, record second week for any film, which was at like 103 million, when we're hearing like a couple mil for a lot of these movies opening. Like the opening weekend's just a couple mil anymore.
Yep.
It was the third highest grossing film of all time as of 2012.
As of 2012. Pretty sure Endgame crushed that.
I'm pretty sure many Marvel films have crushed that. I think that Captain Marvel's even crushed this one by now. It was the highest grossing of 2012, not surprising. It was the highest grossing of any film made by Disney, again, at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was the first MCU to cross the $1 billion mark. Because none of the others had. Like, even when Iron Man had been wildly successful, that was only like hundreds of millions. It wasn't $1 billion.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I mean, when you talk about, billions and trillions, it's difficult to even imagine that amount of money because it sounds fake.
It does sound fake.
It sounds fake, but...
It sounds about as fake as a Google.
But when you actually think of it in terms of how much money people are spending to see it, it's a pretty huge accomplishment for a film to have.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a single movie raking in that money.
However, these impressive numbers are not necessarily the reflection of quality or even continued quality over the last decade. Numerous critics actually saw the flaws early on, despite the film's continued great reputation among the fandom. Again, why there is a disclaimer here, we know that this is probably still kind of an unpopular opinion. But you have A.O. Scott from the New York Times believed that, quote, "While the Avengers is hardly worth raging about, its failures are significant and dispiriting. The light, amusing bits cannot overcome the grinding heptic emptiness, the bloated cynicism that is less a shortcoming of this particular film than a feature of the genre."
Damn, that's
burn. That is such a savage drag.
My God, dude.
I love it. Thank you very much.
I think we spotted the Nolan Batman fan over here.
Right. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times commented that it, quote, "provides its fans with exactly what they desire. Whether it is exactly what they deserve is arguable." That's one I tend to agree with. The fan service is there. Is it what I needed out of a movie? Maybe not. And Karina Longworth of The Village Voice said that Whedon's script demonstrated the backstory of the characters, but the film does not explore it in a, quote, substantive way, which I hardcore agree with. And that's why you have all of those characters that are extremely disjointed. They have chemistry that doesn't amount to actual workable chemistry in many respects. Or at least it doesn't amount to workable chemistry where it should. AKA Steve and Tony, when, again, this is supposed to be a backbone of how the rest of the Avengers movies work, and you're never going to sell Civil War to me on people who hate each other.
Like, seriously, Tony and Steve is friendship in the comics is legendary, and that's part of what made, you know, an event like Civil War so
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here in this movie, they're at each other's throats like almost immediately.
Well, Tony is at Steve's throat almost immediately, and then we're writing Steve as, there's only one God, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't look like that. What is this line? Actually, Joss, please explain.
Like, when did Steve ever give the indication that he
was a hardcore Christian? The fuck? This
Also,
isn't Daredevil, bud. What the hell?
Yeah, you're mixing your people up.
I'm still pretty sure that Matt wouldn't even say that.
No.
God. What the fuck?
Which, fun fact, for people who actually have watched Daredevil, they did actually reference the Battle of New York in the first episode of the first season, so technically Daredevil has always been MCU canon.
Dun dun dun!
Mm-hmm. And now it's becoming more official, I hear.
Yes. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
But
you also, quick though, you made the comment about how Steve hates bullies, so Tony coming in and being a dick to him
immediately
and acting like
a bully.
I mean, I don't know what you thought you were doing with that, bro.
Bad. You were doing bad.
You took
and then we throw the emotional weight of Coulson's death on Steve when this isn't Steve's fault.
No.
Steve got along with Coulson just fine.
It would have made more impact to do that to Tony, since Tony was the one who knew Coulson the longest out of all of them.
Yeah, but Tony just gets to act self-righteous and upset about it, which is generally how they characterize Tony in basically every Avengers movie now.
Mm-hmm.
Love it, except I don't. I don't. So, on to someone who isn't Joss Whedon. Alan Silvestri, returning from Captain America, the First Avenger, handles the music, which gives it this very classic, epic feel. It sounds a little bit like Captain America. It doesn't sound a ton like Captain America. It's very, old school Superman sounding, kind of.
Kind of, but at the same time, it's different enough that it's very much its own thing. And now it's the recognizable theme for Marvel. Mm-hmm.
And the recognizable theme for the Avengers in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, the music in this I actually noticed, where in some of these films, we haven't really noticed the music at all, because it's just kind of there.
Yeah, it's just kind of background noise.
Especially, like, with the Hulk. It's just kind of there. Like, we noticed it a lot with Thor. Mm-hmm. I kind of noticed it with Iron Man 1, not as much in Iron Man 2, because it kind of gets overshadowed by the use of, like, the cool song in it.
I noticed it a lot in Iron Man 1. Mm-hmm. Because it was very rock-oriented, but just shy of being what it was in Iron Man 2, but it was noticeable enough.
Yeah. Well, and Joss wanted Silvestri because it was going to give it, like, this very Hans Zimmer school of music, and it's like, okay... Alan Silvestri is not Hans Zimmer, but if you wanted Hans Zimmer, why didn't you just hire Hans Zimmer?
Yeah.
Is it because he was too busy with Batman?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. He was probably too busy doing a Nolan film, is what he was probably doing. Oh.
I mean, probably.
Yeah, probably. But, I mean, I actually really like the music in this film. It holds up. It's one of the things that's really solid about this movie, when a lot of crap is not.
On rewatch, a lot of it has kind of aged poorly or fallen flat, but the music has remained very, very nice for a Marvel film. Yeah.
I actually noticed it a lot more in this rewatch than I have previously, even.
Yeah.
Because it was actually cued really nicely, even though, like, some of the shots were just... janky and weird and paced weird. This movie's just weird. So, if you were gonna give it an overall rating, Em, what would you give The Avengers for this rewatch, your official FANSPLAINED rating out of 5 stars?
I think 3 stars. Which is probably being too generous, but It's because there's some scenes that still hold up for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I still get excited for those scenes. I still like, some of the one-liners. We did enjoy parts of it.
Yeah, it's just very select parts in the middle of a lot of stuff that really felt like a slog.
But ultimately, I still liked it better than Age of Ultron, and I can still rewatch it more than Age of Ultron.
I mean, again, I've only seen Age of Ultron the one time, and I was so offended by it that I never rewatched it until we're going to rewatch this.
Oh, I have. I've rewatched that fucking turd. And so that's why I'm giving this one 3 stars. Like I said, I know it's probably being generous compared to everything that we've said, but overall, I still enjoy... The parts of it that I enjoy tend to outweigh me giving it anything lower.
Yeah, I rated this at 2.5, which is pretty similar. Because there are certain things I did really still like about it. Like that one scene when Loki's coming down the staircase in the gallery in Germany.
Yes.
Still slaps. It's still great. It's still great. The way that the music is set over the top of it, fucking great. I still love it. Joss's reputation over time has constantly made my rewatches a little more cynical each time I've done them. And I have watched this one a lot, but like there's still some things I like about it. There are still some things though that I have disliked since 2012 going onward.
Yeah.
Like it's never really been a 5-star for me because it has always had those, those few problems, especially the way that it treats women.
Yeah.
The way that it treats basically the Asgardians and Steve in particular has
Steve's
always driven me nuts.
Steve's writing has always been one of those,
I'm really glad that actually, I don't know. I don't know how much Joss had to do with Cyclops in the original X-Men, which we'll get to at the end of this week. Because it really comes off as not liking that, like, token good guy leader, whatever, when, like, Joss is also one of those dudes that really buys into that nice guy dichotomy shit.
Yeah.
So, like, you'd think that you'd like morally upstanding dudes, but all this movie does is take pot shots at Steve.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are a lot of things that have really deteriorated the score for me over time, but there are still things about it that are still nice. Nat's fight scene's getting better. Mm-hmm. Love to see it. The parts of that fight scene at the end are great, but overall it's still way too damn long.
I'm still pressed at how Tony wanted to act like, well, Steve, you're not doing anything, you're just standing around in your costume, and you're not asking any important questions, you're just doing what you're told.
Because I'm so into science and you're dumb.
And Steve's like, oh, well, they gave orders, and I'm like, wait a minute here. Are you forgetting this dude literally disobeyed orders, direct orders, and went behind enemy lines to rescue people?
Yeah, Steve is not lawful good, and I think that is where a lot of the misunderstanding here comes from, is Joss really interprets him as this, not just morally upstanding, because Steve is that, but he's interpreting it as specifically this lawful good, by the book kind of guy that Steve has literally never been. No. The only time Steve really starts feeling like Steve is when he's, like, under the influence of the scepter.
Yeah, when he's angry and he's, like, calling Tony on his shit.
Yeah, because, like, they try and claim that this cap is darker or whatever, and I'm like, only in that one moment when he's, like, sassing Nick. That's really as close as you really get to dark Steve. Because otherwise we're just kind of characterizing him as, ha, look at this guy, he doesn't know anything, it's so funny. Ha. I hate it. I hate it. Also, I find the inclusion of the World War II, it was the World War II stuff, that's what I thought was xenophobic as fuck, is that he interprets Germany as solely about World War II.
Yeah.
He doesn't really interpret Germans as anything else, and I find it incredibly fucking lazy that if you're gonna set something in Germany, your immediate fucking go-to is just Nazis.
And World War II.
Really? Really? like, I get it on one hand, but on the other, it's lazy. It's really lazy. It's not nuanced at all. It's, like, the most obvious shot you could have taken in that moment.
I guess the one good thing he did do with Steve was that it was an equal opportunity butt shot.
Oh, yes. His costume was America's ass.
That is America's ass.
Yeah, so that's really what my 2.5 stars is for.
America's ass?
America's ass.
Good. As it should be.
As it should be. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fansplained, if you've made it this far. If you enjoy what we do, consider donating on Ko-fi. Everything we make goes right back into the production quality of the show. We appreciate all of our subscribers and everything you do, and we're thankful for anything from Hulk smashing that like button to your questions and comments on each episode.
That really got you.
That really got me this time, and especially sharing the show with your friends. Fansplained is a weekly media criticism and deep dive podcast, and we're currently still working our way through the chronological order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then some.
Mm-hmm.
This week is going to be pretty loaded, since this episode was a little late, as we'll be covering the release of The Batman tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
the recent release of Cyrano later this weekend,
Yeah.
and then we're shifting into the first X-Men timeline in our MCU pause post each Avengers movie. So each time we do an Avengers movie, we're going to pause, and we're going to go through some of the
X-Men.
connected but not quite canon universe pieces. So we're going to do the X-Men stuff first, and then we're going to do Spider-Man leading up into the MCU Spider-Man stuff.
Yes.
So that eventually, when that all culminates, we will have everything covered.
Yeah, and plus by the time we actually get to Spider-Man, No Way Home should be out anyway.
I mean, yes, it's going to be soon anyway. Like, we're not going to get to Spider-Man until next year. Yeah. Doing this weekly, we're not even going to get to Spider-Man until next year.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to do. So, yes, we're going to start going into X-Men this month, and then we're going to finish the month out with Iron Man 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then April we'll be getting into... Well, no, we'll be getting into Phase 2 at the beginning, or the end of this month, but we'll be really diving into Phase 2 in April.
Including Daredevil.
Including Daredevil.
Which you have never seen.
Which I have never seen.
But now she has to watch it. Ha ha!
You can find our updates here on YouTube, as well as on Twitter and Ko-fi at Fansplained. If you want more of our conversations on the MCU and other fandoms, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for new episode notifications. Until next time, Salt Shakers, this has been Ryan.
And M.
With the Fansplained podcast. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Yep.